Then we're going live now. Welcome, gang. The Tattered Map. How's everybody doing today?
What's up, everybody?
Let's see here. Let me get my window capture straight. Boom. There you go. All right. What are the Castle Dossier, huh?
Yeah, this is sort of a part 2 of where we were last week with the Dickens dossier. So get my notes.
Is that spelled K-N-O-A-T-Z? Notes?
G-H-T-Z.
Oh, gotcha. Notes.
So this is a quote from investigator John O'Connor from, I believe, Scotland Yard.
Here, 1 second. Let me just producer ship. All right. Take it away.
The most important thing to me at that stage was thinking not necessarily the list, but the fact that here we are of many high-profile individuals taking part in what would be more or less as secret meetings taking place in Westminster, looking at the age of consent, looking at the activities of PIE, and almost trying to dismiss, it would seem, some of the allegations made against some of their colleagues by the Dickens report. And that, to me, seems of the nucleus of the story.
Whoa. We're getting big into it. 1 second. Let me do one more thing. I'm just going to stop that right there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Sorry. Continue. So this is getting right. It's specifically about investigating what we were talking about last week.
Yeah, and you can find that interview. It's in the links in the bottom. We're going to go through the stuff, of course, at the end of the show. Or at the end of the main part. So, in the recent investigations into the existence of a pedophile ring in the UK government, 2 former MPs, which are Conservative MP Geoffrey Dickens and Labour MP Barbara Castle, so both sides of the aisle, are said to have assembled dossiers on the activities of pedophiles and pedophile groups connected to the government. In both cases, the documents claimed to have been produced by Dickens and Castle have disappeared. The dossier allegedly produced by Labour MP Barbara Castle was brought to light in 2014 by a man named Don Hale, the former editor of the Bury Messenger, it's spelled B-U-R-Y, newspaper. Hale's claims, along with the testimonies of former law enforcement officers and civil servants, have implicated Special Branch in the protection of pedophiles within the establishment. Special Branch is... They're responsible in the UK for national security. They're National Security Enforcement Branch. You could say that for us, it's sort of somewhere between the CIA, NSA, and FBI.
Okay.
Because of the way that Britain compartmentalizes their police forces.
Bureaucratic intelligence movers.
Yeah, very, very much.
Gotcha.
Very,
An
very
agency much. Format, a bureaucratic format. Okay.
When Hale came forward, he gave a statement to the police that he had received documents from Barbara Castle in 1984 regarding meetings held at Westminster by the Pedophile Information Exchange, or PIE. Hopefully at this point we feel a notorious activist group pushing for lowering the legal age of consent in the UK as low as 4 years old. Which, going back to your show earlier today and the intro with the map professor that's blown up on TikTok, it's the same line of reasoning that you're hearing today, literally.
Yeah.
Hale stated that Castle had acquired minutes from PI meetings at which several senior politicians were in attendance. Hale also asserted that Castle had provided him with a typewritten list of 16 MPs connected to PI, as well as a list of approximately 30 prominent supporters and financiers. Hale stated in an interview, "She started to feed me some information and bring in some documents, and it's quite explosive, really, in terms of what she was showing me here, that there was a pedophile ring operating within the powers of Westminster, and that many of the members were actively supporting the PI network, the Pedophile Information Exchange Network, and I find it quite amazing." And she gradually came in with more and more papers, and the interviewer asked, "Do we know where she was getting the documents from?" And he replies, "Yeah, she's got contacts within the House, and they were feeding information to her. She'd obviously been an MP for donkey's years, but really having sort of left there, quit and gone as a Euro MP. In '79, she stopped being a regional MP and was elected to the European Parliament."
Whoa. Okay. Whoa.
But she still kept in touch with him, and a lot of her contacts kept in touch with them, and a lot of her contacts were feeding her really serious information here about people that were meddling in the Pi network. And the aim really was to try and get enough support within Westminster to make it legal to have sex with children. And she was absolutely appalled by this and wanted to obviously put a stop to it. So, among the names on the lists were Conservative MP Rhodes Boyson. Castle alleged that Boyson had been responsible for the distribution of Magpie, the magazine of the pedophile information exchange. Boyson was a member of the Conservative Monday Club, an organization implicated in allegations of child sexual abuse at the Elm Guest House case, which we don't have time to get into the Elm Guest House, but it's very much related. Conservative MP Joseph Keith, accused by Anthony Daly as being present at parties where underage rent boys were abused.
Whoa.
Liberal MP Jeremy Thorpe, who stood trial in 1979 under the charge of paying a hitman £10,000 to murder his former gay lover. On a visit to New York in the early 60s, Thorpe picked up a rent boy in Times Square. The FBI would later contact Special Branch to inform them of Thorpe's behavior.
Whoa.
So right there, it's sort of a bit of an international connection, considering that the Pi network was an international network.
Yeah. And we're having connections all the way to the top of.
Someone we brought up last week, Conservative MP Leon Britton, implicated in the Colin Peters pedophile ring that was investigated by Operation Hedgerow. 2 police officers on Hedgerow testified that their surveillance work was shut down due to Britton turning up at one of the sites. We talked about that last week. Former Prime Minister Edward Heath. Don Hale claimed that, those are the most notables. Don Hale claimed that Barbara Castle had accused Heath of there's a few more, but Don Hale claimed that Barbara Castle had accused Heath of abusing boys taken from care homes on board his yacht, the Morning Cloud.
Ugh, it's a gross-ass name for a yacht.
Charles Napier, former treasurer of the Pedophile Information Exchange and half-brother of MP John Whittingdale, he was convicted in 2014 for sexually abusing 23 boys under the age of 16.
Whoa.
Diplomat Peter Heyman, who we talked about last week. A member of Pi, Heyman was investigated by the police for the possession and posting of pedophilic material in 1978, but managed to escape prosecution. That was the guy that we talked about. I think he died in 92.
Whoa. Gross.
So in preparation for publishing an article in the Bury Messenger about the Pi meetings within Westminster, Don Hale said that he had called several of the people mentioned in Barbara Castle's documents, including Jeremy Thorpe. In Hale's police statement, he stated that Thorpe was stunned by his call and the questions posed to him. The following day, Hale received a surprise visit from Liberal MP Cyril Smith, who demanded that Hale hand over all the documents he'd acquired from Castle. Hale described Smith's behavior as being extremely aggressive, abusive, nervous, and agitated. Hale refused to give Smith the documents, causing Smith to leave with a parting threat that Hale was making a huge mistake and would be sorry. Cyril Smith is now, as we talked about last week, widely acknowledged as a notorious sexual abuser of children. The next morning, Hale claimed that his office was raided by a group of over a dozen special branch officers who pinned him to the wall while his office was searched and the incriminating papers seized. The officers also allegedly waved a D notice in front of Hale, threatening him with arrest for perverting the course of justice if he tried to publish anything about the existence of pedophiles in Westminster. They threatened him with 10 years, which I'm sure you know in England is a serious sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're threatening to ruin his life.
So for those of you who don't know, a D notice is a request for media outlets not to print any material that may be damaging to national security. Although a request was made to the Ministry of Defense to find a copy of the D notice allegedly served to Hale, the Ministry of Defense asserted that it was not possible to produce any documentary evidence, citing the D notice committee's Code of Confidentiality and periodic destruction of archived records.
The UK loves doing that.
Yeah, dude, BBC and Doctor Who.
Exactly. I talked about that earlier on the talk show. Lord.
And Don Hale's not the only editor who claims to have been served a D notice when attempting to report on child abuse by MPs. Hilton Timms, the former news editor of the Surrey Comment, alleged that he too was given a D notice in 1984 after receiving information about the Elm Guest House and its connections to Parliament. Helm's account of the actions of Special Branch was supported by a former commander of the flying squad of Scotland Yard, John O'Connor, the guy I quoted at the beginning. In an interview with Hale, he highlighted the state of affairs in the early 80s. Quote, Special Branch were a law unto themselves. They were the government's protection unit. They were totally ruthless. They worked directly for their puppet masters at Westminster, and above there was a strong rumor around Scotland Yard that there was a big pedophile ring in Westminster and that a major investigation was highly likely. We remained on standby for something really special, but then it all just seemed to die a natural death. Keep in mind, Thatcher had already covered up for this 3 years prior.
Yeah, so there's like, to cover it up, there's already a foundation to rely on to do it. And that's, just died a natural death. It's so gross.
The alleged treatment of Don Hale and the information passed to him by Barbara Castle seemed mirrored in how allegations against Cyril Smith were handled while he was the Liberal MP for Rochdale. Former Lancashire police detective Jack Tasker stated that he had begun an investigation into Smith in 1969 after being asked to by Rochdale Borough police officers. The Rochdale officers told him that they had twice tried to investigate Smith, but both times they were shut down by the chief constable of Rochdale, Patrick Ross. Right? So think about that. It goes back to 69 that they were aware of this and were shut down. Who knows how long it had been going on, and that these folks were infiltrating Westminster and doing their best to change public policy regarding lowering the age of consent down to basically nothing.
That's so crazy. It's such an insidious plan. Sorry.
Jack Tasker claimed that his investigation was also halted by two men who visited his office and demanded that he hand over every scrap of paper he had on Smith.
Fucking A.
And quoting him, he said, "The names have gone now, but they didn't ring a bell at all. Then the thing was, you've been investigating Cyril Smith, yes? Where's your colleague? Did you see Coronation? He'd be on his way down to Middleton where he'd lived, and they'd be coming to pick me up. Where's all the stuff, right? I think it's in that drawer for you." I said, "It's locked in an opening." And at that stage, Tom walked in, so I talked and looked up and sat both down and later on every scrap of paper that you've got into the Smith inquiry. No, submit anything, drafts of reports, anything at all. We want it now. We're taking over the investigation. You're not to do anything. You're not to go into Rochester unless it's some other duty. You're not to interview anybody. You're not to speak to anybody about it. And if you do, there will be serious consequences. I suspect they were Special Branch. I don't think he was treated because he was Cyril Smith. I think he was treated because other people were rather worried that if Cyril Smith went before a court and he'd open his mouth, and he had connections in high classes, I think, and he would have opened his mouth and told them.
Wow. That's exactly why. I think so. I agree.
It's sort of rambling, but that's the quote.
Yeah.
Special Branch Officer Tony Robinson has also come forward declaring that he saw a complete police file on Cyril Smith's crimes at Special Branch HQ, all ready for prosecution and having already been submitted to the Department of Public Prosecutions. Robinson also claimed that he had taken a call from MI5 to hand over the file to them in 2014.
Whoa.
So they're still aware of it. They're still doing their best to track down as much as they can.
It's just so crazy.
Yeah.
And
like, I want to say that the thing that's really, really insidious here is that they're using fake government notices for all that they know, that there's no record of. They've got like a secret police squad that's apparently being handled by Thatcher.
Yeah.
And who are they supporting? Child abusers. Like organized, networked, international child abusers.
That's exactly who they're supporting.
No lizard people involved. No adrenochrome involved.
Very human. This
is all just gross people being gross.
Yeah. Compromised, very high up, very high achieving pedophiles.
Yeah.
Aristocratic pedophiles.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
The Metropolitan Police searched the Barber Castle archives at Oxford University's Baudelaire Library in an attempt to find the Pi meeting documents. Nothing was found. Tim Hulbert is a former employee of the Voluntary Services Unit of the Home Office. He testified to the Independent Inquiry in Child Sexual Abuse, or IICSA. You'll see that I've got a bunch of links in the description to iicsa.co.uk documents that are totally relevant to exactly what we're talking about here, that's come out in their independent investigation over the course of basically since Savile, because Savile blew it wide open. So going back to John O'Connor once again. Secondly, he made the point, and as I said in answer to Mr. Altman, I believe he said to me that it was funded at the request of Special Branch because of their interest in maintaining a watchful eye on pedophiles. And we know, I think, that at that stage there was at least one inquiry going on by the Obscene Publications Squad into PIE. So you know that takes care of the second. Of the third issue was in relation to my role, which as a consultant in relation to what was, and he emphasized the fact that it was a renewal of, and therefore did not require the regular input which a brand new grant would have had from a consultant, and therefore it was inappropriate for me to pursue it.
Whoa.
So they said, this is a paraphrase, he essentially told you, none of your business. Is that fair? Yeah. What they're talking about is the government grant that was supporting PIE to the tune of £30,000 a year, and by the time they even stumbled into it in the early 80s, like it was pushed through to be renewed, and so it didn't have to be looked at.
Whoa, it's like a Parliament version of like putting the info behind a paywall.
Exactly.
Like, no, we got to keep paying. It's not up for review.
Yeah, it's not up for review. Nothing like we're going to pay them so that we're not compromised.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to. Like this $30,000 a year or £30,000 kickback in 1981, which is a ton of money. Even
they can't keep pedophiles out of those bitches.
No,
it's like they want them.
So like this is that's basically my notes for today.
Okay.
Like it's not quite as intense, and by intense I mean as convoluted as last week, but it's an addendum to what was going on 3 years later when they tried to look into it again. Yeah. Everybody involved shut down national security.
Yeah.
So let's see, what have we got on our sources here? This is from the Mail, 2014. Chilling day. Special branch swooped to seize another dossier on VIP abusers. This is talking about Don Hale.
Ooh. Barber Castle.
Yeah, there's Barber Castle. He says it was like something out of totalitarian East Germany rather than Margaret Thatcher's supposedly free Britain. The detectives identified themselves as Special Branch, the division of police responsible for matters of national security. They began to flash warrant cards and bark questions, says Hale. It was as if they were interviewing a potential criminal rather than a law-abiding newspaper man. The officers told me I should abandon plans to print the story that was scheduled to run in our next edition. If I didn't, they told me to expect a long jail sentence. Initially bewildered by their threatening tone, Hale soon worked out the purpose of the police visit. The focus of their attention was an incendiary dossier he had been handed a few days earlier by long-serving Labour politician Barbara Castle, a powerful feminist and stalwart of the traditional left who served in Harold Wilson's cabinet. She was for years the MP for nearby Blackburn. Yeah, that's Don Hale right there. To her frustration, politicians seemed unwilling to discuss this important issue, says Hale, so being aware of my investigative work in the local media, she approached me and we agreed to a meeting. Over tea and a bun at the local cafe, Miss Castle opened a battered briefcase and handed Hale a bunch of extraordinary documents. They included typewritten minutes of meetings that had been held at Westminster in support of the pedophile agenda, along with the details of a host of establishment figures who had apparently pledged support to their cause. No fewer than 16 MPs were on that list, several of them household names. Also mentioned multiple times was Tory Minister Sir Rhodes Boyson, a well-known enthusiast for corporal punishment, and Education Secretary Sir Keith Joseph. I don't suppose you'd be interested in writing a story on this, Miss Castle asked in what Hale described as a tone of weariness. She perked up when I told her that yes, I would be interested, he said. though I warned her that I would have to make inquiries with the authorities about some contents of the dossier.
Whoa.
Accordingly, a few days later, he put in a call to Home Office. I could detect the antagonism from officials as soon as they answered, he said. The institution that should have been protecting vulnerable children seemed more interested in stopping the press from prying too closely.
Hashtag Savile.
Yeah, right? Which, going back, let's break for a second and talk about Savile.
Yeah.
Like,
who was active during this time.
Absolutely. For those of us here in America, it's not a story that you hear about unless you dig on. They don't put it in the press here. But that guy had unprecedented access to an astounding level, to every level of British culture.
And he was living in children's hospitals.
Yeah, they would give him a little apartment.
Yeah.
You know?
He was literally living in children's hospitals.
And this is the guy that we really like is credited as I understand it to really being the first what we call DJ, like 2 turntables and a microphone, like not necessarily like playing the turntables,
yeah,
but instead of live music, just showing up with a pair of record players and mixing so that the music never stopped all night. That was a new thing, and it was like Jimmy Savile's disco was what they called it.
Yeah. He started the continuous nighttime dance life of the UK, which is still a rich thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even through a pandemic. So Savile was enormous in British culture. Enormous. But obviously had to have been attached to this specific situation.
It seems astounding to me that he wouldn't be, considering that the guy had access to the royal palace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, he could just walk up to Prince Philip.
Yeah.
And talk to him.
I wonder how much he walked up to Prince Andrew.
I mean, probably a lot. Again, I heard a story forever ago when Prince Philip was younger that he pulled a 12-year-old girl out of the audience, walked her right into Buckingham Palace and up to Prince Philip, and they had a conversation.
That's insane.
Which is that kind of power and majesty within that structure on that island.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to my whole theory that Jimmy Savile was their court magician.
I agree. I think that there's a lot of interesting juice behind that theory. I think I agree with you, and I think we probably took over for Churchill.
Yeah,
whoever was in between.
Yeah. No, that's my theory is they took over for Churchill.
Yeah, and now you have probably someone like you've speculated before, like Darren Brown.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's Darren Brown is obviously the.
Oh, that seems to be like, especially considering the sheer amount of cultural influence Darren Brown has on the UK in specific.
Yeah.
And to every culture that imbibes UK media.
Yep.
Like through streaming, Yep. So pushing him into a corner, they began barking orders. Let me assure you that this story is not in the public interest, said a detective. It cannot be printed as a matter of national security. That can't be right, Hale told him. Look, we're not here to argue, the detective responded. Are you going to hand over your papers? No, Hale replied. At this point, the officer produced a document signed by a judge. It showed this previous remark about not printing the story had not been a request, but an order. The document handed to Dale was a D notice, a relic of wartime censorship that could be served on newspaper editors, allowing the government to block any story that threatened national security. If you don't comply with this notice, we will arrest you for perverting the course of justice, the detective barked. You will be liable for up to 10 years in prison. At this point, his resistance collapsed. He'd been plunged into a situation for which he had little experience. In his first editorship and married with 2 children, he says he couldn't afford to casually put his family and career at risk. The papers from Miss Castle were swiftly confiscated, as were Hale's notes and even his typewriter. When I asked the reason for this strange act of expropriation, I was told it was being taken in case of allegations of fraud, he says. You might have typed these statements yourself, the detective said, referring to minutes of pedophile campaign meetings. As the police left, Hale was warned never to write about the raid or tell anyone that it happened.
Damn.
At one point I found interesting was that they all spoke with London accents, says Hale. Not a single man from Lancashire. It was obvious this was a metropolitan police raid, planned in the capital. This was confirmed when, disobeying Special Branch's instructions, I phoned Bury Police about the incident. They knew nothing of it and were astonished. Rather less shocked was Barbara Castle. When Hale saw her a few days later, she told him, I thought this might happen. I wish you told me, he'd replied. I was totally unprepared. If I'd known, I might have been more discreet into my inquiries to the Home Office or been able to hide some of the papers. Miss Castle apologized. Well, this certainly shows the extent of the cover-up, she said. We're fighting a formidable foe.
Damn. Hey, that's no truer words were ever spoken about this particular foe. Very formidable, very ridiculous. Like this infrastructure she's fighting against. It is literally the world against this woman.
Yeah.
Shout out Castle.
Right?
The way that article captured her look of surprise when the story when that reporter said he'd actually entertained the idea of covering it. It's like that level of suppression.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and she was, she's just tired at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it sounds like she was just dealing with defeat after defeat. And you have to understand, Barbara Castle came to British politics, I want to say, in like 59.
She's been there for a hot minute at this point. She's no rookie. You know what I mean?
So here, I've pulled up, it's a witness statement from Hale that's posted on the IICSA website.
Okay.
What else do we have?
All sorts of things.
Oh, here we
He gave me
go.
a limited amount of paperwork, which was enough to perhaps run a story, and asked if I would do it. And I said, well,
Hit
the only
that
way I
top
can do it
slider.
is on
Turn
the
that
back
up.
of, in fact, you're doing it as the local your MP.
Yes.
You're instigating this inquiry. And I think what she had mainly was intelligence about a second inquiry that maybe Leon Britton had instigated in terms of looking into the Dickens dossier.
Yeah,
But
producing,
I think the
directing.
timing was probably about right in terms of maybe six months, 9 months after that had been registered. And so I think there was a second inquiry going on within Westminster to see who may have been involved in all this. And plenty of the paperwork she gave me involved minutes of meetings, copies of meetings, French meetings really, within Westminster, people who were supporting the Pi network. There was a lot from the National Council of Civil Liberties and things that were involved as well. But there were a number of people that were listed as actively promoting and supporting the Pi network to actually provide speakers from the Pi network at the fringe meetings.
And these politicians were named in these documents?
Yeah, a lot of them were named. I mean, obviously I cannot remember all the names now,
Sure.
but there were two specific lists. One was a list of 16 active MPs and peers that were involved with this. Another was a list of about 30 people
Oh,
who
Christy,
were supporters. There were
drop $5.
Well, thank you,
heads of
Christy.
private schools
What
or
up?
teachers or involved with scout groups and organisations from
Only
the church.
$15 more
that were, again,
before we draw a
funding and
name for a
actively
hoodie.
Supporting this.
What up, Christy?
But, various MPs were named in sort of, if you want to get a speaker finder, contact Rhodes Boyston, for instance. He was somehow involved with the distribution of the Magpie magazine, which was the Pi magazine. And there were copies of adverts that were flagged up here where they were openly promoting open weekends at different public schools for boys and things. And different events, mainly involving children and boys, were flagged up as something that's worthy of note.
Like, think about that. They were advertising in the Magpie about these different events for boys at schools. And this is a magazine.
frightening
This
as
is a
all
magazine that ran for like 10 years.
Frightening as all hell. It makes me think that maybe there's some cryptic story behind the song Good Morning, Mr. Magpie by Radiohead.
Right?
You know?
Wow, yeah.
There's some interesting lyrics to that song.
Well, we will probably touch on at some point. I don't know that I'm going to do a whole thing on it. And you don't really need to. You can actually... it's more depraved than the wiki makes it sound, and the wiki makes it sound really depraved, but there's a guy, Rodney on the Rock, K-R-O-Q.
Yes.
Right? Rodney Bingenheimer. Rodney Bingenheimer is the story of Rodney Bingenheimer's English disco is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, just what's written on the Wikipedia is a fucking nightmare, you know? And you start looking into the culture surrounding especially British rock stars in the 70s.
Yeah.
You look at like David Bowie basically bragging about having sex with a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, nobody ever held him to task for that. I love David Bowie's music.
Yeah.
I love his art, but come on, let's be honest. Like,
When I was a kid, all of Pamela DeBar's tell-alls came out and were celebrated.
Pamela DeBar has a story about how she was like 16 at Rodney Bingenheimer's English Disco and was being mocked and viciously made fun of as an old lady by the average patron who was 12.
Good.
They had the most common mode of dress there was I think they called it Hollywood underwear, and the girls would literally just wear a super long t-shirt and like stockings, and I mean like garter belt and stockings.
Yeah, but there was nothing on it.
No, it was a beyond hypersexualized fucking environment. The craziest story I've ever heard about it was the manager of the Runaways,
Yeah.
Kim Fowley, said that he yeah, the folks who are so proud to not watch Rosemary's Baby but have a Ziggy tattoo. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there, But Jimmy Page is one of those who was an offender that was, again, seemingly celebrated all throughout my childhood and upbringing.
Well, he was brought... Remember, Jimmy Page was a child performer.
Yeah.
They brought him in young. He was normalized to that environment as something to aspire to.
Yeah.
Like, that's I think, part of how they did it was by bringing in people as young as possible to normalize all this to them.
And then potentially control them through that as one of the means.
Which is sort of Ghislaine Maxwell's defense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that that's the case or that she doesn't need to be held to task for exactly all the things she did, but that is sort of her defense.
She's from a scary culture. I got a feeling Maxwell was probably a member of this fringe demographic of parliamentarians meeting up in secret to discuss the Pie Network.
I believe that. Or that people associated with her family, and definitely Epstein, was associated with the modern version of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I have no problem
And I think they were running a blackmail operation, just like the British government was running a blackmail operation.
Yeah.
That's why, to me, this story is so relevant. It needed to get out now. Because it is timely and relevant to what's going on.
Yeah. It really is. Oof.
It's just
a punch in the gut, because we're also, again, seeing kind of relevant things in the news right now. We talked about Duggar on the talk show today.
Yeah, that's close to both of us. Yeah. I moved to Northwest Arkansas in 2003, and Jake was raised there. I spent 17 years there. I very, very much enjoyed it. I mean, I've got my problems with it, but I wouldn't tell somebody not to move there. I just said that over the long term, eventually, it wasn't right for me.
It's the coolest place in that state,
for sure.
It's the most beautiful spot in that state, too.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I always love my home.
Half of it was the weather. Like, not even knocking their weather. My health just doesn't deal well with it anymore. I can breathe so much better out here.
Same. Which is frightening, probably, for how we sound on air sometimes. I know myself for sure.
But, like talking about Duggar, no, I believe no adrenochrome involved, that Duggar was... One, he was definitely part of an online network.
Yeah, definitely like doing some torrent level shit. Like,
two, his family
uploading and downloading.
His family totally covered for him.
Yeah,
and I believe that where there's smoke, there's often fire.
Yeah,
and you could totally see some sort of weird family network, or honestly within their church being operated network. Not to disparage their church, not even saying it exists. I'm saying that these sort of things are often organized within groups like that to give them a sense of moral, plausible deniability.
The AOL pedophile ring that the comedian Bearcat brought down.
I've never heard about that.
There's a documentary I'll turn you on to. It's directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. Bobcat Goldthwait was a very dear friend of him. His name was Barry. I don't want to misspeak on his last name.
Right.
But he was known as Bearcat early on in his career. It's actually what inspired Bobcat. And then for a while, Tom Kenny called himself Tomcat.
Okay.
So they do a Bobcat and Tomcat duo comedy bit and open for Bearcat. You know what I mean?
Well, that's genius.
Yeah. They were a very interesting... But he was a very interesting guy, but he was abused as a child, and when he became an adult and the internet popped off, he was on AOL boards and stumbled upon that network and would pose as a child sometimes and take the information immediately to federal authorities.
Excellent.
It was a big part of them breaking it up. He fought, actually, tooth and fucking nail to get them busted. It was a bunch of compromising figures, and it was early on in the internet. And it kind of was touching on that, like, well, can we police this? Do we police this? There's no litigation standards set yet.
There's an excellent book that's a big cornerstone of the background of what will eventually be the other show that I do, by a guy named Stephen Levy. I believe it's Stephen Levy. You know, me and names don't have them in front of me. Named Hackers. And it's basically the story of how computers were started and the culture around them up to about 1985, right? But he goes into the at the time, what were bulletin board systems, which were computers that had like a phone line run to them, and you could dial into their modem, be online for a little bit. They'd limit you to like 30 minutes, hour and a half, something like that, depending on your status on the board. It was not unlike your Discord server.
Yeah.
Not like it, but not unlike it.
Not unlike it.
Comparable.
Yeah.
Comparable.
Yeah, a means in which to communicate with other people.
Except it was one person at a time, however many phone lines they had at a time, combined with however many computers they had running in tandem or whatever. You got me? So it got expensive real quick, but a lot of people
like
run a single node.
Yeah.
Well, and like they even had email. Like they'd all get all their messages on there, and then at night at like 2 a.m, they'd phone and spend 15 minutes uploading it to a central hub and downloading all the messages that were uploaded the day before.
That's crazy.
Still runs. It's called FidoNet. It's the easiest way to get a hold of certain deep parts of Russia.
That's crazy and gross.
But at the time, he was saying, you know, the thing about it is it's uncontrolled. There could be serial killers out there running bulletin boards for each other.
In Tor, I won't lie, like the deep web has some very sketchy things on it. You know, red rooms.
Well, I think that all of this
like
is like the modern extension of what he was worried about at the time.
Exactly.
But I also wonder how long were things like that operating? Like a lot of these networks were very keyed in technologically.
It feels like they're also attached to something that goes way back. Like, you know, it doesn't just pop up as an internet startup. Something like a red room.
No, let's talk about the Finders in 1979 and how Marion Petty created a computer consultancy company that started working for the CIA by trading their agents.
Man.
And that he was like state of the art. And that his cult started using state of the art Tandy Radio Shack computers.
Yeah.
Like when I say state of the art, I mean in consumer.
Yeah. John's gonna check out after the fact. Shout out, John.
Oh yeah, John. Well, we're still gonna be on for a little bit.
Yeah.
But so they would consistently upgrade, as near as I could tell. Like they generally had brand new nice machines that would cost you like $4,000 to be that tricked out in the era that they had them.
Yeah.
And they'd throw them in the back of a van.
Yeah.
So that they could get their email via a payphone with an acoustic coupler modem, like you'd see in old school 80s movies.
Yeah.
How long has that sort of shit been going on?
I mean, at least since the inception of that particular technology, but there has to, like you're talking about, it goes way back when it comes to cryptically moving intelligence.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of ways to do it that are outside of computation. You know what I mean? Like actual analog computers.
Yeah.
Like, this obviously existed before that, which timeline-wise goes back to fucking prohibition shit in America. I mean, you have these crews of people engaged in this deviant
let's talk about
behavior.
Al Hubbard for a second, who was making radio networks for bootleggers.
Yeah.
They already had an example in place from the 20s that they could have studied and built on.
I always wondered how many other pirate radio stations were off of boats, like that early punk rock station.
Well, you had to be.
You know?
And, you know, that's something that I've talked about. Like in
England, rock and roll station, whatever.
In England, it was really common to rent, like get a boat to broadcast from international waters with a big transmitter. But even if they caught you on land, it was only like a 500-pound fine, and they might seize your equipment.
Yeah.
In the U.S., it's a felony, $10,000, and they will be seizing your equipment. They do not want people to be able to mass communicate like that. Yeah. They hated that, like as John clued us into earlier today, they hated the idea of us being able to trade filmed media for forever. It had to go to the Supreme Court in 1984 to say that you could tape off the airwaves.
Hated it. You talking about raiding people that had like
six movies.
Like 6 movies.
Yeah, the FBI would raid you for having 6 movies if they knew.
I've torrented and stole 6 movies as a 16-year-old, blindfolded, upside down, and like warming up for torrents. You know what I mean? Like,
look, man, they kept that Zapruder film under wraps till like 78, just as everybody's exploding with video recorders. They didn't want that shit propagating. It's being studied.
Yeah. We were talking before the streams today about, you mentioned vector monitors.
Yeah.
The information this same infrastructure has on the effects of looking at a screen.
Yeah, no, okay, that goes back to a secret report from, I want to say, 45. It may be as late as 46, and it may be as early as 44. I think it's 45. I can find it, but it's on radar operator fatigue. And this was super, super important in that period because our radar network was the only thing that was going to keep us getting nuked.
Yeah.
Like, the Russians didn't have it yet, but we knew they were going to have it soon. Like, regardless of whether or not the nuclear information had been leaked.
It was good. Okay.
Right. And radar operation and the automation of radar was a big national secret of how we did it back in the 40s during World War II. This tied back to our study on cybernetics, which isn't, as I try and always preface, cybernetics isn't the art of mixing man and machine as one biological organism per se, but truly the study of the interface of how man deals with technology. And in that case, they were trying to understand this relatively new science called cybernetics and apply it to everything.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was tied. And their later cybernetics experiments that involved putting wires in people's heads, like Leonard Kyle.
Yeah.
That's all tied together, as near as I can tell, as a backbone, weirdly, through our radar program because of that. Because our radar program was our only early, and it was so secret and so important in the Cold War.
Yeah. But, yeah. Jesus. I just... The means in which they can control a person. You know, we've got like the Leonard Kyle, where they're using machines. What's his name? I always misspeak his name.
Luis Angelo, I can't remember his last name.
Yeah,
we'll have to check it out.
I'll say Luis for short, just so I can latch on to a name. For some reason, my name always goes to Jose, but dude had like 8 names.
No, totally, and that's part of the issue is that he had definitely 4 personalities. You know, and the whole story he had about being in place with a whole set of like 16 people is different, like 16 teams to shoot. Doesn't seem unreasonable when you hear about what Oliver Stone was talking about this morning on Breaking Points, where he says that, you know, he got mad when he saw the 50th anniversary of Kennedy and how it was treated with the official lone nut narrative.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm doing another a documentary, and it's called like JFK Revisited or some such. But he says that he found another guy. Was the exact same story. This guy was an anti-Castro Cuban who had, not an anti-Castro Cuban, but he was a Cuban who was an American citizen, just of Cuban background, who had defected to the Soviet Union just like Oswald, come back with no problems just like Oswald, right? And had obviously been set up and trained to shoot further down the line, just like they say Oswald was, or set up as a patsy for it.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty wild what he's claiming, and I can't wait to see that documentary and all the new shit he's going to bring to light.
So nuts. Oliver Stone has always been on when he has that kind of long-winded series. I think it's on Netflix right now, The Untold History of America.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's Oliver Stone. So, you know, it's good. It's good. It's Oliver Stone. Sometimes he's either hit or miss for me. I got to be in the mood. You know, he's got a certain level of like unintentional belligerence.
Yeah.
Even when he's making a documentary, I think that sometimes is off-putting to an audience member like me, but really attractive to most people.
You know, Oliver Stone was drafted in a Vietnam combat troop.
Oh, fuck.
Something he was not a fan of.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, like it's very convenient that Stone's coming out with this and having us question our narrative. And if you listen to what he said, he's questioning the narrative of, do we have to question our enemies or anything like that? And I'm not mincing words when I say our enemies. I mean geopolitically. I don't have a problem with the Chinese culture or people. I don't have a problem with the Russian culture or people. Big problems with their governments.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And he's coming out just as all this is heating up and bringing out the one thing that has destroyed faith in the U.S., like in the U.S. of its own government, which was the JFK assassination. I've often wondered, was JFK in many ways done not just for the immediate political implications, but because it was going to cause us to have such a lack of faith within our own apparatus in an emerging media sphere where they knew it was the implication was it will be consistently looked at because the story's so inconsistent.
Yeah.
I've often wondered that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, was JFK not just an assassination?
So who was the last? It's Louise.
Yeah, Louise. It's not the last Tattered Map, but the one before that.
Yeah. Episode before last. Louise is one of those characters that's stuck with me since we did that episode. Again, just having to put myself in the shoes of somebody who your mind and your personalities are layered. You're layered your baklava on there, dude. There's like 18 layers, but to 8 layers. The layer in front of who you really are is violently suicidal.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to even get to who you really are. You got to dip through a personality that is designed to self-destruct.
Exactly.
And that's an unfathomable level of control for me. You know what I mean? And that's
well,
one
to
of the
me,
more
it seems like
and I believe him. I believe that.
It seems like the type of trap
testimonial
that you put on a
scientist.
dead drop, because the guy was also designed to be a messenger, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you know how to open the dead drop, it doesn't explode. If you turn the thing the wrong way, there's a grenade in there that blows you up along with the information, right? And
Yep.
lets everyone know the spot's compromised.
Yeah.
Right? I think they build a dead drop into him and probably have a whole different thing, not even associated with that little slip of paper that he had.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole different key that's like Blue Moon banana juice or something, not even related to that letter code, and just pow, they're back to where they're supposed to be.
I wonder, when talking about screens, I wonder how primed every one of us is now and susceptible to things like that in particular, because of the, like radar operators. You know what I mean? We will. I'll crush more than 8 hours in front of a screen in a day.
Yeah. Oh, no problem.
Easy peasy.
No
Like,
problem.
not a
I'm not happy about that, and I
Yeah.
try and cut it back, but I know that that's not a problem for me.
Yeah, I'm normally tired as hell afterward, and I've always wondered why, because I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But fatigue.
No,
is
you've been burning mental calories the whole time. You've
Yeah.
been burning all the calories that cause your eyes to lock track and stay where they're at.
Yeah.
And we don't think that that's comparable to running,
Yeah.
but it is. You're like, burning calories is burning calories, and mental calories absolutely count.
Yeah, absolutely, and just your long wind, or just like the longevity of your day mentally, will decay after so long in front of a screen. I've noticed, and I think this establishment knows. Well, we know the establishment knows this, but I think there must be ways to prime a motherfucker. We got to be easy to turn into something like Louise.
I think I don't think it's everybody, but I think that it's very easy for the people that it can be done to.
The demographic that are susceptible to it is probably easily presented now. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to do, one, with the lack of level of discourse that we want to entertain anymore. Like, that's part of it. We've all been hyper emotionally primed to react without thinking to a ton of stimulus out there. Yeah. And we engage in these what are called a specious complex correlative heuristic, which is you just, like putting your foot on the brake pedal, you don't think about it, you respond. Yeah. And it's often based on saying, well, this means that.
Yeah.
Well, you got to give people a benefit of the doubt. Like, even if they're using a dog whistle, they might not know that because that's how dog whistles work.
It's a function of humanity that applies to a lot of stuff we've talked about in the last week, whether it's Kim Potter's reactions or cancel culture.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those that...
Well, and it's a fundamental... Like, the thing is, it's a fundamental mechanism of how we deal with the world. It is actually a form of the balance mechanism. Can I... do something? Can you hold up your hand, and I'll show you something? Mm-hmm. This is a form of, it's not scientific, but it's a form of what hypnotists call a susceptibility test.
Yes.
Susceptibility in many ways appears, I don't know that it is, but appears related to the balance function that keeps you upright.
Yeah.
You got me?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, it's not even a one-way road. It's more like either a lack of usage or an overusage. Like, an overcorrection or lack of correction are both indicators of potential susceptibility, and also indicative of how you should approach that person. So, like in your case, right? Like, you stopped to here, but you stopped it before it could hurt you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you were willing to engage, but you still had enough critical factor to keep from being harmed. I didn't bend your shit back with a sudden movement.
Yeah.
And you didn't stop me immediately.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're capable of maintaining your critical factor while still being in a general state of susceptibility, at least allowing you to engage to try and understand what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I I have a stupid thing, and this irks my baby mama endlessly. Intent is in the elbow.
Oh,
If you the key to a perfect high five, the chef's kiss of high fives. Watch the elbow.
oh, right.
People telegraph with the elbow. You know where that hand's going to be because you know the length there. You can follow the elbow.
Right.
And intent with an arm sometimes for me is measured. I watch that elbow, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I don't remember where I picked that up, but ever since then, it's even changed the way I like.
I wouldn't be surprised
sparred.
if it was Cook Soul Wan.
I think it might have been like some offhanded shit my instructor said when I was younger. But yeah, I watch elbows and knees, and that's why I kind of agree with like we were talking earlier about shooting at legs.
Yeah.
Like it's not just incredibly dangerous for everybody around. Like let's just talk about take the gun away. Striking at legs is a risk unless you're really close or like you have like you're Joe Rogan with your kicks.
Yeah.
Like you got that back kick like Joe Rogan. It's not worth it. Go for body shots. Go for the head. Get those arms taken care of. Like,
yeah.
Pin them if you got to. Don't.
But no, legs
Striking
are
at legs.
incredibly tough. They hold you up all day.
Yeah, and that's what's so impressive sometimes in UFC when you see somebody basically like, win the fight with the legs, striking at someone's legs.
Yeah.
Like when Anderson Silva broke his shit.
Yeah.
Live on air. That was like that was one of those where it's like this might ruin your career, that leg strike.
Yeah.
And so it's not it's like almost propagated, and I've said myself is, if you shoot below the belt, you don't catch that murder rap. But it's like you could kill somebody, they could lose a leg.
The one thing to really understand is that look at how good they shoot on their worst day at the range, right? I don't care who it is, anybody. Special forces operators.
Yeah.
Their worst day at the range, under stress, like just the stress of having an adrenaline dump. And they simulate this through exercises to get you built up to adrenaline.
Yeah.
Under stress, your group widens up to twice the size.
Yeah.
The police do not go through this simulated stress training. Like they go through simulated training in like a light room as reaction training.
Yeah.
But they're not required to throw a kettlebell 10 feet between each shot.
Yeah.
To simulate the physical factor of how much you're going to be shaking in that environment, which widens up your pattern, your size, right?
Yeah.
Your shot grouping, not pattern,
Yeah.
not shotgun. Well, that's why you've got to aim for the biggest part, because a flyer can hit someone who's innocent, not involved, that you're actually trying to save as a police officer.
Gotcha.
Like if
You want to make sure it hits the actual mass.
The use of deadly force being justified is not the same as saying it's okay to execute them.
Yeah.
It's saying if they die in the only way that we have to stop them in that type of exigent circumstance, where generally they are armed in a way that you can't react to,
Yeah.
that it's acceptable in that case. People don't understand about knives. A person who's already got a knife out can close 21 feet faster than a person could even draw a gun.
Yeah.
And because it's the rare person who spends a 3-week course at Terran Tactical and comes out John Wick.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves spent months of doing nothing but spending rich boy money on paid training to get that way.
Yeah. Shout out Tom Segura.
Yeah.
Terran Tactical, man.
They'll teach you to shoot and run through a course.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Imagine having a John Wick hidden inside of your mind.
Yeah.
Where somebody could say something benign to you and you wake up 3 weeks later covered in blood, like, wait, what happened?
Absolutely.
What I did what? And then you vaguely remember? It takes a hypnosis to pull it out of you?
Darren Brown does a whole special where he creates a hypnotic assassin. And in doing that to the guy, he's just training with a BB gun.
What I mean by that guy's the devil.
But in doing that, dude's shot grouping gets half the size when he puts him in a trance.
Yeah. Like makes him a better shot.
Yeah, and don't act like for a second that a BB gun and a real gun aren't comparable training tools for accuracy shooting. Yeah. Those professional BB gun shooters measure their shot groupings in 1/10 of a millimeter.
Yeah.
1/10 of a millimeter. Like that, like they're really mad about blowing a shot by 2/10 of a millimeter.
Yeah.
Like, air guns are a well-made air gun's absolutely comparable in terms of talking about shooting capability.
Yeah. I think so. I know that I've like. It depends on. Yeah. No, I think it is.
Like as an
I've shot both,
indicator
and I
of shooting
think so.
capability.
Like I shot
yeah.
pellet guns and BB guns as a kid endlessly in the Ozarks. You know, it's just something you have.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Endless
Dude, I
access to it.
grew up with them.
Yeah. And like I told the story on the stream before of doming Bill the chicken, the rooster that fucking pecked me mercilessly. Yeah, God forbid I'd had a real gun, I could have domed that chicken just as efficiently. And with the pellet gun skills, you know, had that lever action pellet gun and just lobbed it right. I swear I got him in the eye. I was mad.
John says that he mentioned the other day that when he lived in Brunswick, Georgia, he worked for Flexi, the Federal Marshal Agent Training Center. I'd get paid to let him treat me as a hostile suspect.
He was getting tased by these tasers we're talking about in the Kim Potter trial.
You're hard as hell, John.
Yeah. Well, hey, he got a pacemaker too, and I think that a lot of his shit should be comped by the government.
Dude,
I'm not saying there's a connection there between some of your health issues and working that job, but
I'm saying it couldn't have helped.
it couldn't have helped. There's no way. Yeah.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. No, I think about that every time I see one of those yellow tasers now. I think about Sean and I think about the pacemaker, man. I'm like, man, that kid couldn't have been good for your ticker. And I don't care what level of behavior you had before, you know?
Dude, he says he was tased, gassed. I'm guessing they put him in stress positions. Basically, it sounds like John Branch is a nightmare for a police officer trying to stop him. like it sounds like it. Like I've got friends in the military, and when you go through any of the basing.
They got John clocked as a PCP victim.
He said, not then. I did it for a year.
We got John clocked as a PCP, he's getting shot. He's like, damn. I can block you.
I mean, I've got friends who, when they go in the military, like part of the training is they put them in a room with the CS gas, and they have to take off their gas masks, open their eyes, and take a deep breath. Oh, and like if their training instructor or drill sergeant, depending on your branch, decides that they didn't take a big enough one, they have to take a second.
Yeah.
Right? And most guys come out fucked up and wanting to puke. And some folks just walk out with some tears.
I would be,
yeah,
pretty messed up, I would imagine. I would be really concerned about cancers and stuff later in my life.
Dude, I remember this video from many years back where a black police officer from another jurisdiction got pulled over and they brought 4 cops out on him, right? And like he's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, talking to him. They hit him with the pepper spray, throws a cigarette, nothing. They hit him with the taser. He pulls the shit out and tells them to call their supervisor.
Good.
And I just imagine that would be John.
Oh yeah, it's just like, nah, I don't fuck around.
Call your supervisor. I'm gonna sit right here.
Am I being charged? Like you ask now?
Well, not since you pulled the electrodes out. We tried to charge you up.
Hey, I have a pacemaker, he says, and they're like, we're sorry.
We'll get back to our source material in a minute. It's nice to take a little bit of a break on that one.
Yeah, it is.
Like even talking about other horrible shit.
It is a tough one.
Well, and I want to say that like blackmail networks, that's a big part of it. When we go back to that first thing I was talking about, which is Carrie Thornley's memoirs, as told to Sandra London.
You ever have that delicious opportunity to blackmail someone in a social circle?
I don't do that.
I've taken it as a kid. No, as a kid, I've taken it. You might as well have given me like the most delicious of guilt. Like,
I don't just believe in karma. I believe it comes back in kind and often real quick.
Oh, it did. I just today have people showing up saying I was an NFL kicker and shit because I've There's been a few rumors I've heard about some people that
but
I heard from me first because I started it.
Before I lose it, man. In that, Carrie Thornley talks about the old guy who he's pretty sure was the guy called Big Brother. Not Big Brother. I'll have to look it up. But who he's pretty sure was E. Howard Hunt, right? Was talking about how his plan was to build a network of blackmailed murderers.
Damn.
Right? But if you're already thinking about building blackmail networks, why not include everything up to and including murderer?
Yeah.
Like you're just building a blackmail network.
Yeah, you're gonna
Like,
have,
like you don't have to be real target focused. It's not like you're only building an assassin network.
priorities for a blackmail network, like things you're looking for a mark. Was it illegal what they did?
Mm-hmm.
You got record of it?
Yeah.
End of question.
Well, going back to what was
I'll
going
buy
on in
it.
England, right?
Yeah.
Like they're dealing with sending obscene materials through the post.
Yeah.
Well, look, like that guy was talking specifically about, like he had brought it up through the milieu of creating snuff films, right? Well, look, if you're already creating snuff films, anything else you can put on film's probably on the fucking table by your moral compass.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like, I think a lot about Roy Raiden.
Dude,
I am convinced he is attached to a snuff film network in Hollywood.
there is a connection. It is more than 6 degrees, and I'm consistently contracting it, but there is a connection professionally through people
Yeah.
between John Huston and Roy Raiden.
I believe that. Well, I mean, if you go deep enough in Hollywood, that's part of their
It's
network
through
scheme.
Red Buttons, who was Roy Raiden's best friend,
Weird name.
who was in that it was his professional nickname.
I don't like it.
He was a Borscht Belt comedian.
He was Russian, and his name is Red Buttons.
He was fucking. It's wild. I think Red Buttons is in many ways the linchpin of the whole thing.
Is he responsible for the Red Scare in Hull with a name like that, dude? That's like an ex. That's like a. That's
He
like
got
a Daredevil
he
villain.
literally got the nickname from, I want to say, a big band leader because of his red hair and the giant buttons that were on his suit at the time.
Oh.
And it just stuck. That became his professional working name as a comedian.
Red.
He was a veteran of the Friars roasts. Like his one of his whole lines, his 2 big lines were, "And they never got a dinner," talking about, "And they never got a Friars roast."
Whoa.
And "I did not come up here to be made sport of." Right?
Okay.
Like he had a TV show in the 50s or the 60s, I want to say. He
Man.
like constantly worked. I don't think he died until like the late 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah, John, you got that all correct.
Yeah.
Started in vaudeville.
Started in vaudeville.
Red Buttons.
Now, what you got to understand about Roy Raiden is that he came out of nowhere from the gangster background, right?
With love for
And
vaudeville.
immediately started running old vaudeville acts and everything throughout Middle America, and he printed fucking money. But the way he did it was through a protection racket. Like this is something I recently learned about him. He would
Mobster style.
he would make local businesses buy raffle tickets that were also tickets to the show.
Whoa.
Yeah, like they come in and strong arm them to buy all these tickets, and then they would resell the tickets to all the locals.
Whoa, I'm not saying I've taken pages out of his playbook, but we're like, $15 away from hitting our goal in the merch lottery, where we draw free merch a name to give some free merch to. So all super chats go to. the
Also,
merch
yeah,
lottery.
John says, yeah, you got that all correct. Started in vaudeville. I've been reading about Buttons lately, and I think that there's a weird connection.
Yeah.
Somehow, Buttons was in the Air Force.
Yep.
I think there was a connection to John Huston while he was working in the immediate post-war era.
What you need to be
Air
researching if
Force.
you haven't already, the event coordination behind all the USO shows.
Yeah, I know, but man, that's hard.
It's a lot, and it's weird to find, I would imagine.
Well,
But John Huston had to have been involved in indirectly.
I think we'll eventually get back to that because I will find a link making reference to USO shows in terms of organization post the 40s, people who came back and got into Hollywood and show business.
Guarantee if you don't see John Huston at some like his name on shit personally being involved, you see his money.
Yeah.
And at least a 1 degree connection between John Huston, his money, and a USO event.
No, guys.
Yeah,
Which
again,
we're probably
comedians,
going to start
vaudeville,
talking
stuff
for a
like
while. All the sources for the show earlier are definitely in the bottom. We can go through all of them. A lot of them are the IICSA direct documents and transcripts. There's a few YouTube videos and a lot of news articles that talk about all of it and talk about everything I was talking about in depth.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about this John Huston thing because I can't get it out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I need to watch Let There Be Light. Like I first saw some of this in Happiness Machines, that first episode of Century of the Self,
Yeah.
which is probably my favorite documentary of all time. Yeah, he did this film for the War Department, but it was racially integrated,
Okay.
and two, like he was talking about how 20% of people who came back from World War II were having severe neurological issues, is how they referred to it, but psychological issues, right? And they basically were like, nope, we can't be putting this out because it's going to make people think that war destroys people and that we aren't taking care of soldiers.
Yep.
So they do a whitewashed version of it called Shades of Grey in 51, where they reshoot it all with white actors.
Lordy.
Oh, and there was some Epstein's type stuff going on at parties given by huge stars of the time, 30s and 40s. Look both into Fatty Arbuckle, the Fatty Arbuckle trial. Yeah. Orson Welles and Charles Lofton were notorious. Okay, John, here's what I've been working on that I think this ties to peripherally, but like we're talking about stuff that's circling around each other that I haven't connected. But it feels to me that the beginnings of Hollywood, starting in the 20s and the silent era and moving on, there was a functional cult type apparatus based on theosophy, and especially Manly P. Hall, that was fundamentally based in the culture of ancient Egypt, which had overtaken all of the culture at the time.
It became hella popular by the 70s in media.
Well, I want you to think about this. When you think about a flapper girl,
Yeah.
short bob haircut, little
Oh yeah, they were using like the Nefertiti stuff all the time back then. Like,
all of the
Egyptian
culture
vibe.
and fashion was based on that. Like flapper girls were like a modern culture. They were trying to make the modern culture into that of Egypt.
So their kind of Hellfire Club culty scene was all Egyptian based.
Yes,
Egyptian
their
pantheon.
particular version of the Virginia Rap. I've looked into that case, but I will look that up for this Cult of Hollywood thing that I'm working on, because I need to build a whole file on all this. But no, it really seems Egyptian based, and like, look, guys, anybody who knows some Freemasons know that they will say, "Oh, we just have a very strong affinity for the culture of Egypt."
It's like when Tom Hanks says he just loves Greece. That's why he moved to Greece right when the Epstein logs are published.
It's really weird that they really weird they built a pyramid right on the big Mississippi River, the Nile of America, in Memphis.
In Memphis, man, when you were talking about what was going on in Minot, it suddenly made Minot make a lot of sense.
But yeah, the Minot thing is crazy. That goes back to the whole radar operator thing. I think that because radar was so secret, and because they had specifically spent so much time and money on this pool of super secret top clearance radar operators, like, to get that job, you had to have astoundingly high security clearance, even though it was a very boring, it was technically skilled and proficient, especially for the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, things we take, like, operating a radar station is something you could probably learn to do today, but it would require more math than you want.
Yeah, it would be like
And an insane amount of drudgery. But yeah, I think that they had a huge amount of specific subjects that they had paid close attention to, especially in light of John Huston's film.
You know, there's probably, I don't know, this is kind of off topic, but also on topic. I imagine there's one, like, hella young Japanese kid in Japan on YouTube right now, prolifically good at running, like, an ancient radar setup.
Oh,
Like,
right.
There's, like, an outlying demographic. It's always, like, there's every time I've done anything impressive, there's an 8-year-old kid in Japan on YouTube upping the ante. Like, beating me, topping me.
Oh, John Branch says, look at Bride of Frankenstein's hair, Nefertiti.
Exactly.
Look,
That's kind of what I was thinking about when I
There
said,
is- there is a conspiracy theory that Mary Shelley's a front. Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote Frankenstein. And that it is an alchemical document based on the concept of what we currently would even call transhumanism.
Makes me want to reread it
It's
through that lens for sure.
Joseph P. Farrell and Scott DeHart wrote a book on alchemy. I think it's just called The Philosopher's Stone, The Eternal Search for Alchemy. You'll have to look it up. It's Joseph P. Farrell, Scott DeHart. Farrell's a noted conspiracy author, but once again, like, I started reading Joseph Farrell in 2010 because the book, I don't want to say the book was recommended by ex-friend's father who worked at the Pentagon. That's not to lend it any sort of credence. That's just why I paid attention. He's like, well, if this dude's reading it and it says it's what he said was, open your mind, just not so far your brains fall out.
Yeah.
But that got me on the Joseph P. Farrell track. And yeah, a lot of the stuff he says is kooky, but when you talk about a lot of the stuff that he's researched specifically related to World War II, a whole lot of it is exactly the shit that you saw 10 years later, like coming out, and even related to our current UFO series.
Yeah.
Or I'd say our series, our current UFO context in the U.S.
Yeah. yeah. It'd be weird if we just popped out of nowhere with like 8 episodes of a UFO
Oh, yeah, y'all didn't
series.
know?
We're like,
Yeah, John says, look at the Bride of Frankenstein's hair. It's Nefertiti. Yeah, no, I think that, I mentioned that before, but that also ties back to what I was saying. I think there was a cult of Hollywood based around not just this, but the alchemical teachings of both Manly P. Hall and what amounts to Manly P. Hall's nemesis, Aleister Crowley. Or Crowley.
This is
like Hall didn't just hate Crowley. Like he despised his work, and he kept a copy of his book to remind him every time he opened his desk drawer of what true depravity was.
Follow me here as I Tokyo drift with this topic. Do you think the Black Dahlia might be one of these groups' botched mummification attempt? Like they were mummifying some of these women? Some of their temple virgins or whatever?
I think the inner circle of this knowledge that is most depraved predates Egypt.
Oh.
It bases itself on the Phoenicians. And in the Phoenician religion, which they held in very high regard because the Phoenicians gave us language, not writing, but language.
Phonetic, hooked on phonics.
Yeah. They have a very Greek style view of a pantheon, including Kronos is in there, right? So if things would go wrong, they had to make a sacrifice to Kronos. They could make an animal sacrifice if it wasn't that bad. They could make a sacrifice of a commoner instead of their first child if it was bad, but not directly related to their lineage is the only way I can describe it. You got me? In the way that Phoenician magic parses the world and views the world.
Yeah.
Or if it was particularly bad, or they needed particularly good fortune, they would sacrifice their firstborn. And when I say sacrifice, they'd put him on a brass altar of Kronos that had fire built into it in a basket he was holding and burn them to death.
Lordy.
And I suspect that throughout history, a ton of people have held on to information related to this cult that it's become astoundingly, when I say diluted and perverted, it's not like it was good in the first place. What I mean is that just like through a game of telephone through the ages.
Yeah.
And that, in many ways that they do that. And part of the reason goes back to there was a huge amount of mysticism in American culture, especially post the Civil War. And it really starts culminating around 1900, 1910. As theosophy really hits, it becomes huge. There was a point in time that theosophy functionally became the religion of the West Coast.
Yeah, that's how it would appear.
Or I would say the overwhelming dominant religion, and it was tons of very important people were into theosophy.
Yeah.
Now, when I talk about Manly P. Hall, who was a theosophist,
era of fortune tellers and shit,
he didn't even become a Mason and was inducted as a 33-degree honorary Master Mason in 1953.
Yeah. So he had a whole ass career.
He was Ronald Reagan's astrologer. He didn't die until 1990.
Oh, Lordy.
He wrote his big book, the Secret Knowledge of the Ages, Secret Arts of the Ages. We'll have to look it up because I'm terrible with names without notes. But and it is the cornerstone of 20th century Western occult mysticism. And it is quite often things that he extrapolated have been proven true via modern archaeology. Like everybody said that his description of how things worked at the Oracle of Delphi was absolute bullshit until it was finally proven through an archaeological dig back in like 2010.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
No, he was very and I urge you to read about him. Maybe on the Theosophy Wiki, they've got one.
Yeah.
Don't become a Theosophist. It's not a good plan.
We'll share some links in the spirituality channel or something. To some
No, I'm not saying don't study and learn, right?
Yeah, there's
I'm
probably
just saying that
good
these big organized groups, no matter how they may have started, have all at this point become hyper co-opted.
Yeah.
Manly P. Hall was, like I said, he was Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan's astrologer, and not just Nancy's. I can't remember who the billionaire was in the 30s that said it, but it was like millionaires use rational thinking, billionaires use astrology.
Good God, that's a sales pitch, right?
It was such a huge part of the culture between that and numerology, and fucking Ronald Reagan was a big numerologist.
That tracks too. That makes a lot of sense, actually. That makes a lot of sense. Take a piss real quick.
Yeah.
Fill the airs.
Yeah, makes sense because Black Dahlia, her buddy, was mutilated in the style of Egyptian mummy making, which totally to me makes sense within that era. She was probably someone that was within that culture. Let's just assume that this crazy narrative I've spun is true. That within that context, her entire career would have been built up as a form of sacrifice. And the way that it would work is, as the firstborn, she would fulfill the symbolic role of the firstborn in that case for whoever had built her up as, say, a producer. You sacrifice your firstborn for the good of your entire career, but you can have as many children as you can have. And hopefully they will all be resonant in the same form that you sacrificed. So you build this archetype, destroy it as an archetype to build your golem functioning.
Okay.
And I think that you see, like, an example where you might see this used in a more modern context is the story between Coven, the band Coven, and Black Sabbath.
Oh, shit.
Like, Coven sounds like the heaviest Jefferson Airplane record you've ever heard. It does not sound like metal. It sounds like it's almost there, though. Right? Yeah. And it's like Coven's, the record is Witchcraft Destroys Minds and Reaps Souls.
It's a spooky record.
It is. It's got all of it. It's got the first use of the horns before Dio. It's documented. It came out in 1969.
It's got a black mass.
It's got the first recording of a black mass, and I still haven't figured out who it was that recorded it. I've spent years trying to figure it out. I haven't spent the last couple years, so I might look back into it.
Yeah. Hopefully that gets figured out. Organs removed.
Oh, we're talking about Black Dahlia. I was getting on this sacrifice thing. It's got a player named Ozzy Osbourne. Not that Ozzy. He played bass, I want to say.
A different
Ozzy Osbourne. Which for years, when this record was so hard to find a copy of, people thought that it was a super secret, you pay $500-600 a copy for this record.
They thought it was they
thought it was an early Black Sabbath, an early band with Ozzy.
Yeah,
right. It had. I'm trying to think what else. It had a song called "For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge," right? You know, like it has all these things that became signifiers later in there. Manson happens, they pull distribution of the record. Now, Coven goes on to be very successful in Hollywood. They do the song 110 Soldier for Billy Jack.
That's right.
You remember?
Yeah.
And I want to say it's the second Billy Jack where he goes and kills the Manson type dudes. He shoots the guy right between the sunglasses.
Yes.
Weird connection.
That is a weird ass connection.
The singer still performs to this day.
That's weird.
Jinx, I can't remember her last name. I remember that she goes by Jinx something.
Jinx Red Buttons. I don't know. I can't get over
But yeah, man. And I think that what happened was they created it within the context of this general occult working associated with Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders, which may have had an intended cultural effect beyond just the effect of covering up what they needed to cover.
Yeah.
Right? That becomes the background catalyst. They pull this record. It's out. There have been copies printed. The people who collect music, it's suddenly a big deal because it's just like the most satanic shit they've ever seen.
Yeah.
It sounds like the heaviest, best produced fucking Jefferson Airplane record they've ever heard.
Yeah.
A girl led the band.
Yeah, there was a female lead singer.
And you start seeing all these bands pivot to that dark imagery off the Led Zeppelin Black Sabbath sound.
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin acts as a bridge. Black Sabbath provides the new archetypical form. And you ask anybody into metal, Black Sabbath wrote all the riffs first in a weird way.
Yep. In a weird way.
Like all their 70s output until Ozzy leaves.
Yeah.
Like that's all the archetypes for riffs that you hear until Motorhead comes in.
Yeah, which is more of this like driving riff. I can break down them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do difference, but yeah.
Well, no, Motorhead is designed to be
Yeah.
the soundtrack from 1979 to 1983 of Stay Behind Army motorcycle gangs going blitzkrieg.
When it's constant, distorted, double-picked bass.
It's supposed to invoke that of a motor.
Yeah, it's a driving. By driving, I don't mean like drive. I mean like it pushes forward constantly. That music and the way Lemmy writes, it's always moving forward in this way. There's, yeah. What an interesting cat.
Oh yeah,
What an interesting dude.
Well, and he always said he was just playing rock and roll, but louder and faster.
Yeah, Billy Jack Goes to Washington. Actually. So,
Funny.
Yeah, that's right. He goes. Yeah, that's right. That's the one with the Manson people in it. Yeah. Billy Jack Goes to Washington. Man, I like Bobcat Goldthwait's pitch for a gay rights Billy Jack.
Dude, that felt like Dog Day Afternoon Billy Jack.
Yeah, like I want like the Paris Monster of Billy Jack films where he's like a power top. He's out there fighting for the rights for equality. It's the same. It's a beautiful message and also great.
Like whatever he makes, it's got to be better than the Rock's version of Walking Tall.
I want Joe Rogan to be Billy Jack in it.
Yes,
I want Bobcat Goldthwait's exact pitch, and I want Joe Rogan to say yes to Bobcat and do the gay Billy Jack movie. It'd be sick as fuck. I'd love it. I would watch that more than I want to watch Dune. I want to watch Dune all the time. I love the new Dune. That was really good.
Oh yeah, same.
That was sick as hell. The Sardaukar change.
But no, like so that to me is an example of setting up this archetype within a general context of culture shift to create new art through making a piece of media something that's a collector's item and influences artists.
Yeah.
You got me?
They made
and
it
I think
taboo
that's a big part of
subject,
how they work with those sort of things. But I think that it's a form of magical thinking that they utilize as part of the process that goes back to a line of thinking taught to them by people who said billionaires use astrology.
Do you think there's anything to like, what was his name? Todd something. Or maybe John Todd. John Todd's old claims that like, you know, he said he was an old songwriter.
Oh,
and he would
yeah.
call, like Crosby of Crosby, Stills, and Nash and be like, do they still do the witchcraft ceremony and stuff?
Look,
and like,
man, the more that I find out about the 70s and then getting shook by fucking, is it Hall or Oates that's a Satanist? Who's the blonde?
It's
Daryl
Daryl Hall.
Yeah, Daryl Hall's
It's an
first
actual
solo
thing,
record is he's a LaVeyan Satanist.
Yeah.
His first solo record is called like Spirit Songs, Temple Songs, something like that. It's produced by I want to say Brian Eno.
Yeah, I think Brian Eno. Yeah, one of the, like he had basically a failed solo career.
Yeah, it's a good record.
Yeah.
Like it really is a good record.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, finding out he was, that really shifted my opinion on that. Also in light of being like, well, what if Roy Raden's the Grand Shingon and that's associated with this showbiz cult?
Oh yeah.
What if they splintered the showbiz cult the exact same way they splintered the process, maybe utilizing the process at that time period that they were putting in the heavy metal meme?
Yeah. Exactly. No, absolutely.
You know, because I think the old Hollywood cult was going out and they had to change things. And they knew video recording technology was about to hit the market everywhere. And they couldn't stop Sony. Like Sony beat the Japanese beat our core.
So they controlled genre even more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They had certain messages within certain genres.
Well, it's so bizarre to me. Like I saw this meme the other day that made me laugh. There was just some kid with big hair from 2008 that was all sad that said, when they call you emo, but you're seen. Right? And I'm like, well, that was the most bizarre thing to me.
Same thing.
They splintered music into a billion genres that were all very distinct and hyper-genreified.
Yeah.
And then
made little cults.
Then they took part of that Victory Records scene that we were talking about.
Which I guess was a straight cult.
The emo scene.
Yeah.
Mixed them together, took it all about fashion, started selling it at a Hot Topic, and only called it scene. No genre in that scene involved.
Yeah.
It reintegrated all of the rock scenes just in time to kill it.
Yes, yeah, you're right about that. No, straight up. In Victory Records, when you were telling me about like the guys from Integrity, like the guy.
Yeah, Dwid Hellion.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah.
that was like that tracks for me that Victory acts like that.
Yeah, well, no.
And acted like that, I guess I should say.
If you were into like hardcore music in the early 2000s, it really, that sound, even the sound of adding the breakdowns to songs, like what we call a breakdown now. There was a band called Integrity that started in 1988, and they're out of Cleveland originally. The guy moved to Belgium, I think, in 2004, and they're heavily one of these reboot process organizations. They start a few years and relatively close to Montreal. Now, when I say it's relatively close in a national scale. The reason I mention that is because of the bass player from Voivod. After he quit Voivod in the 80s, in the 90s, when the internet first went online, right? Like the World Wide Web first went online, that part of the internet.
Yeah.
He was hosting the Process Church's server from day one.
Oh.
Out of a like $10,000 Next machine. Next was a computer that was made by Steve Jobs when he left Apple for a while.
Damn.
Yeah, out of his fucking closet associated with that. There was a big interplay between, say, like Cleveland and Ohio, going all the way over to there as that scene, because you'd go up and tour through Canada over to Montreal and come back, or go and then pop back down to hit like through the New York and come back that way. You'd make a big circle that took you through Canada. Yeah. And Montreal is their New York City, especially in terms of art.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
You know, and I'm thinking in terms of old school Process networks. The Process had a network in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Like they had a setup in Cleveland.
Yeah.
They had one in Chicago. They had one in Montreal. And we're talking about like they'd have a mansion with a bunch of property and a big fence around it.
So they had the Northeast shored up.
They had the whole country and the Northeast.
Yeah, but like the Northeast was their hub. It sounds like their main like.
It went all the way down. Like I don't know about one in Florida, but they definitely they had one in. Basically, cut the Southeast out and take it down to New Orleans where they started.
Yeah, because I know like the Finders were like they found Finders shit in Florida.
Yeah, the Finders, it seems like that branch.
Yeah.
Like once the Process finally splits into a ton of different cults.
Yeah.
That the Finders, which was already going on the whole time.
Yeah.
Right. Their territory, if we think of it like gangs, was basically the Eastern Seaboard going down to Florida.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Fuck. It's like it is designed to be like biker gangs. Stay behind armies.
Yeah.
Stay behind groups. Don't get in a cult, guys. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, it's like they've got territories, but also they may operate anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? They just aren't running operations everywhere.
They have the ability to operate anywhere.
Yeah.
Man.
Through the use of putting back a ton of donation money. You know, the thing that goes back to me about the Process, and that I saw with Integrity and his whole media operation, and also with Feral House and their Process media, it's called Process Media Operation,
So fun.
is that they focus on media. Their thing, they've realized, is the manipulation of culture through art. The Process's big deal was magazines, right? They put out slick magazines, slick and thick magazines.
I mean, their artists ended up on Parliament Records.
Yeah.
It was culturally relevant, and it was a branch off of. I mean, it was in high regard in the lowbrow art scene.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
by lowbrow art, I mean like that became the highbrow art scene. You know what I mean? At that time. Like you had people like Crumb organizing these massive art events. In the Process Church, they had artists there.
Yeah, no, like that was their stock in trade with graphic artists, especially, and writers.
Yeah, you better believe Process people met Stash from Poland.
I'd be hard pressed knowing about that guy to think that they didn't make contact with him.
Had to have. He probably didn't like him.
Well, I mean, he's precisely the type of person they would have sought out because of their hyper affinity for the Reich.
Yeah. Well, and you know, he is unfortunately the imagery behind the modern fascist movement in Poland. Like specifically the Poland analog of what we're talking about happening in America. Its face, its stay behind army looks like a Nazi version of Stash's art.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, you know, and that doesn't even, like, we're talking about all this, you know, I've been really looking into what's going on culturally. Like I said, there was relative to the size of the countries, a huge amount of effort put into those programs in Belgium and Luxembourg. Belgium especially, because apparently it's long been just a hotbed of European politics.
Yeah.
But the current scene based out of there, like out of Luxembourg and Belgium, there is a huge amount of neo-folk martial industrial music
Yeah.
that's coming out of there. It's become like the cultural cornerstone of that scene, which is a scene that has been around since Death in June put out their first record in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, we don't talk about it's not big over here except for some goth girls looking for relaxation music that aren't thinking about the lyrics, basically.
Yeah. Nice.
Or fascist cats who are pumping iron to it.
Yeah. Or fascist cats who are pumping iron to it. There's a topic I'm going to revisit, but like speaking of some of these strange cults and groups within like media and Hollywood. JT Leroy, goddammit.
Oh, yeah. Dude, the JT Leroy situation has been pretty wild. I didn't know about that until like yesterday.
Lux and I are going to deep dive it on the channel. Like, we're going to do a full edited video where we break it down, the whole JT Leroy situation. But just the fact that, you know, there's kind of there's a documentary film made recently where there's even in 2021 people tongue-in-cheek bringing up these circles inviting an underage AIDS afflicted heroin abused child to their parties.
Why would you do that?
Why? Like, I never once in this documentary heard any of these famous people say why, other than the merit of the art. But you're talking about like Asia Argento banged the person pretending to be JT Leroy.
Yeah.
So the motive was sexual from the jump. They were groupies over this child junkie.
Weird groupie bug chasers.
It's so weird. Like, it's some of these groups and the way they're controlled.
Well, like you look into like, if anybody was making MK Ultra films for us, this is total extrapolation. Totally just high octane speculation. If anybody was making MK Ultra programming films like the shit Alex was forced to watch in Clockwork Orange, for NATO, it's going to be Asia Argento's father.
Yeah. Word. She's made some weird ass art, man.
Well, and who was it that she was with? Killed himself. Everybody loves him.
Bourdain.
Who's Bourdain look almost exactly like?
Epstein.
I'm not saying in any way, like I'm not saying they're the same person. I have a suspicion that sometimes celebrities are somebody's exit strategy.
Yeah.
They just step into a role after some good actor training.
A lot of this that Bourdain thing happened. Bourdain died around the time all of the accusations came from like underage men who had slept with Asia.
Yeah,
it's like her thing is going after these like troubled underage boys for some reason.
Same with Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Who looks exactly like Zena LeVay.
Sure does. And it's like, what are you getting from this situation? Why?
Sense of power?
Like, it's you know, JT Leroy was brushing shoulders with these circles that were like the washed up heroin scene, like after that fell out of fashion even.
Right.
Like, still involved in that.
Well, dude, they made the Basketball Diaries a huge film because they were absolutely trying to just push that meme.
Yeah, the Let's Go to Cannes Film Festival, heroin and beignets crowd.
Heroin and beignet.
You know what I mean? Like, that's it's gross. It's gross, that whole scene. But you know, we're running close to 8 o'clock. Do we have anything else in this chapter of the story?
Not in this chapter, guys. I sort of couldn't make it through through all the sources today, but they are in the bottom. You can look through them. They'll confirm and go further on everything that I was talking about.
We can pop through some more sources if you want to.
Let's see what we got. Oh,
we can always part 2 this bad boy to start earlier in the day. I ran late all around today.
Let's see. We've got a bunch of ICSA documents. Statement of Neil Jerome.
Oh, the straight up dish on it. The actual scoops.
Let's see. We've got the article about the guy who tried to pay, Jeremy Thorpe, who tried to pay £10,000 to kill his gay lover.
Lordy. That's Barney Frank level juicy. It's like, what are you doing, man? How are you a government official? Sex lies and a lost videotape. Whoa. Almost 40 years after he was ordered to destroy it, Tom Mangold's film exposing a conspiracy to protect Thorpe will finally be aired.
Now, here's the thing. This isn't the only conspiracy documentary like this. We have an American version of this called The Franklin Scandal. We've got two. We're gonna get to we'll get to the Franklin Scandal peripheral to when we're talking about Michael Aquino here in a few shows.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Dutroux affair in Belgium, which is where this is definitely happening in Belgium. Like I was just talking about, hotbed of stay-behind politics.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get to the illustrious career of not David Ferry, right? Michael Aquino.
Michael Aquino.
Magically shows up just as soon as David Ferry dies and looks exactly like
identical. Down to the weird eyebrow spikes. You know? This is wild. So this film happened. I want to see this.
Let's hope it gets released.
I want to see this film. Please, no one unalive that's still alive making this happen, because I want to see that film from Mangold. I think everybody probably should need to see
Here
it.
we've got a report from 2015 talking about Sir Edward Keith.
5 UK police forces investigating child sex abuse claims involving the former prime minister. Right there. Damn,
Prime Minister from 70 to 74, during that time period that Peter Heyman was shipped off to Canada to finish out his professional career before he came back in 74, and within a couple months immediately got busted.
Man.
Here we're talking about the senior MP's half-brother who got busted for abusing 21 boys between 67 and 72. Remember when they said they tried to get Cyril Smith in 69?
Yeah.
You remember 1970 was when Paul Kidd started grooming kids in the palace.
That's so many boys in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, so they knew something was going on in this crazy late 60s, early 70s period. And think about what's going on in British culture with their art and their biggest stars, David Bowie.
Yeah. Yeah. You have these strange, eyes wide shut pedophilic parties happening involving these, people in the House of Lords or Parliament. High up in Parliament. Okay.
Yeah, according to the Manchester Evening News, the establishment knew Cyril Smith was abusing children but covered it up, damning inquiry finds. Yeah, and of course all these people die right before Savile goes out and it blows wide.
Damn. Cite your sources, folks. This is important. This is crazy.
Hey, John, everything does seem connected to each other, but don't get paranoid.
Yeah.
Like
Planet ain't going anywhere.
Things are connected to each other, but it's not like a big monolithic thing in control of everything. It's just horrible people who know how to hide.
Yeah. Media gagged over bid to report MP child sex cases.
Yeah.
This is when the media. This is when they
2014.
released that
We've hit the end of our Guardian limit here to actually read in. So
damn you.
Here's your local Guardian. However, let's see if they've paywalled us.
They're like, we'll violate that D notice as long as
there we go.
You pay.
Yeah, former Surrey Comet news editor gagged over reporting of alleged pedophile ring.
Damn.
That's Hilton Timms, paper's editor between 80 and 88. Caught a D notice in 84. This goes into the Elms Guest House in Rocks Lane, which is the Elms Guest House affair. That's the one where I think it was Cyril Smith kept showing up.
Damn.
Yeah, here's where the ex-Scotland Yard commanders were basically saying, we were ready to investigate them in the early 80s.
Whoa.
That's John O'Connor who was talking about it.
He's like, yeah, we just couldn't. We weren't. It naturally dissipated.
Yeah, this was in 2014 where they said he said he believed that files were still in the archives. But as we know from last week's show, they found 10 of the purported 110 or 111 files.
You didn't. Yeah,
101
they didn't even find the tip of the iceberg.
No.
Iceberg.
What have we got here on the BBC?
Detective claims 3 probes.
3 probes into Cyril Smith were stopped.
Damn. So they just kept trying to probe. I bet that cop ended up in some trouble. Kept
Oh,
trying to
right.
probe it.
Yeah, Smith would have made mincemeat by any decent barrister or solicitor, former Detective Jack Tasker says. So this is the article sourcing Jack Tasker.
Damn. Excellent.
Yeah, Jack Tasker talking on Sky News.
I think certain circumstances.
Since have probably proved I was right, that we were probably right. He says he was guilty and I think he should have faced trial.
His fat, he's so big.
He said that he had interviewed the boys and had believed what they'd told him, adding, they were interviewed separately and all had similar stories. You can tell a good witness. You can tell a shaky witness. It's part of your job to do so.
I think Cyril would have been a shaky defendant.
Smith was accused of 8 counts of sex abuse, including 6 offenses at a care home he set up in Rochdale.
Lordy. The interview, as he walked out the door, he said, "This will kill my mother." Huh.
Yeah.
I'm trying to garner sympathy for you. For getting busted. How MP Cyril Smith got away with child abuse.
Yeah, that's from 2013. And we never hear about the government having, in the UK, having a huge amount of this. But as this stuff's hitting off is when you're having to deal with the rise of the Pizzagate and comic ping pong. Like, that's when it starts really happening over here. And part of it is because one of the WikiLeaks files and all of the weirdness in there, like, they haven't denied that those files have, they haven't said that in any way that they're claiming they've been doctored.
Yeah, no. There's, as far as anyone knows, those are the actual emails.
Yeah.
According to
So I'm sure that if there's something there, that they ran
There's something weird about 'em.
ton of counter propaganda
Yeah.
designed to dilute the story and to muddy the waters.
Yeah, and keep people away in the UK away from this shit. They
Well,
got
you
the
notice
UK
how
talking about
suddenly,
America at
like
the time.
Australia is basically, like, the EU rules changed so that it's very hard for them to get American news.
Yep. Yeah.
Like Australian rules changed all seemingly at one time.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, what's the point in having an internet? Yeah, they said in the late 60s, Lancashire police carried out several investigations into Smith's behavior, compiling an 80-page file.
Here. Dickens Dossier. Secret file in the establishment. Pedophiles, maybe.
Once again, this is 2014, so they were still hoping that they'd be able to find those files, but 90% of them disappeared. Though, like they said on their independent report, allegations of what were contained in the files, they found a lot of related stuff within there that weren't necessarily part of the specific files in the Dickens dossier, especially related to cults, like the Children of God cult. Oh, you mean Joaquin Phoenix's cult?
Yeah.
The guy who they got to play the Joker?
Where
Now let's
was
go
raised.
back to our
Yeah.
early archetype of film, right?
Yeah.
Joker's based on the man who laughs visually.
Yes.
Who was it that directed that? I can't remember. But I'm betting you'll find a connection there, because I think that Hollywood in some ways is still being run by people who it's their goal to put a lot of these archetypes out, even if they're dressed in modern trappings, that still represent the archetypes held within the ancient Phoenician and ancient Egyptian religions.
Oh, that tracks. I mean,
It's a synthesis
That sacrifice
of basically the Phoenician Greek religion and the Egyptian religion.
The old pantheon.
Which would make sense. They were obsessed with the Egyptians.
Yeah.
And all of them were classically educated in the Greek tradition.
Yeah.
The Hellenic tradition.
Yeah. And that is how very much things were structured. It's like described as like over deviant, like Greek lifestyle of the wealthy of the 1920s. You know what I mean? That's what I think is the film Metropolis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a Metropolis themed party, if you will, but 20s, like flappers.
I think that was Fritz Lang.
Yeah, Egyptian shit everywhere.
Home Office accused of giving money to pedophilia campaigners, and that's talking about that loan that grant that I was talking about, £30,000.
Yeah.
Tim Holbert, who worked for the Voluntary Services Unit during the 70s and 80s, told the Westminster Strand of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse that he'd seen the payment recorded on a spreadsheet.
Damn.
The payment to the Pedophile Information Exchange has been marked on an official document as a grant made to the Women's Royal Voluntary Services. Mr. Holbert said he'd been made aware of the grant via a senior colleague called Alan Davis, who was new to the VSU, the body responsible for deciding which UK voluntary organization should receive government funding.
Yeah. It's, all tied to the government saying, no, the denotices, then files just disappear. We have evidence of people actively going around to round up this info and burn it.
Mm.
Which is crazy.
Mr. Hubert was approached by police about his claims after he contacted the BBC following the 2013 screening of the film Secret Life of a Pedophile about a social worker, Peter Wrighton, one of the founding members of PIE. So now let's go back to what we started your talk show with earlier today. The map professor on TikTok.
That TikTok
spouting
professor.
The exact same thing
that
these people were saying within the institutions of social service and within certain institutes of higher learning in England during that time period.
Yeah.
It's the same
scholarly
line,
circles.
And it's happening at the same time in many ways that we're seeing a big push for socialism and communism in our country by people who haven't actually read about what that means ideologically.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying communists are pedophiles or socialists are pedophiles. Don't get my words twisted on that, please. Yeah. What I'm saying is it provides a milieu that those people can infiltrate, control, and subvert.
Yeah.
Under the auspices of doing good. Look at who was the first female senator? I found this really interesting. I think her last name was Latimer. She only served for a day. It was an honorary position. Rebecca Latimer Felton. Let's take a look at Rebecca Latimer Felton. This, to my mind, is sort of how it works. Rebecca Ann Latimer Felton was an American writer, lecturer, feminist, suffragette, reformer, slave owner, and politician who became the first woman to serve in the United States Senate, although she served for only one day. She was the most prominent woman in Georgia in the Progressive era and was honored by appointment to the Senate. She was sworn in on November 21st, 1922, and just served 24 hours. At 87 years, 9 months, and 22 days old, she was the oldest freshman senator to enter the Senate. She was the only woman to have served as a senator from Georgia until the appointment of Kelly Loeffler in 2020, nearly 100 years later.
Oh.
Her husband, William Harrell Felton, was a member of the United States House of Representatives and Georgia House of Representatives, and she ran his campaigns. She was a prominent society woman, an advocate of prison reform, women's suffrage, and education modernization. However, she was also a white supremacist and slave owner and spoke vigorously in favor of lynching.
Whoa.
Newman Bartley wrote that by 1915, she was championing a lengthy feminist program that ranged from prohibition to equal pay for equal work.
Whoa. That's wild as all
That
heck.
doesn't fit our concept of how values are astoundingly intrinsic to a lot of these positions.
Yeah.
And because it doesn't fit our concept, it's very hard for us to even remotely imagine. So within a concept with a framework that's based on just making emotional moral choices and assuming everybody who makes the same choices are on your team, well, if a person has some of those positions and some that are at odds, they may know enough to both hide it and manipulate you and your movement to their end. Prohibition happened because of this movement.
Yeah.
The temperance movement was tied directly to the women's suffrage movement.
Yeah.
At the same time, women's suffrage was tied to the freedom of women to smoke and get cancer.
Yeah.
And the taboo on it was broken by a guy named Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew. There's a very, very interesting story there. So you look at how all these things are mixed together to nominally pull us forward while at the same time pulling us back. And the reason why isn't like necessarily a big monolithic conspiracy, but it's because human beings believe their values that they hold are all intrinsically correlated together, and they're not.
Coincidental neuropathy or like neurosis.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like a thermodynamic coincidence. You know, like some of this. So there's no monolithic bad guy. It's a bunch of different. A bunch of different heads to that monster.
Well, and things that seem to have the best intentions can be co-opted by people who have the worst intentions, but do share some of the same values and can vehemently defend them right next to you.
Yeah.
Lordy,
lordy.
And that's the same way, to my mind, in a weird way, that pedophiles can infiltrate the government and social institutions.
I wasn't familiar with this particular kooky old racist lady from history, but I, learned something every day on the channel, John said earlier. Today, for sure.
Well, it's a wild story. It's like, how does someone simultaneously believe and understand that women should be free, but also think black people are subhumans who should be lynched?
It's disgusting. Like, despicable.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is.
Yeah.
Because we recognize all these things are intrinsic to human freedom.
Yeah. Like, somebody who might bring women forward again is a racist.
Well, you'll find, hey, look at the history of the Nazi Party.
Yeah.
They were very big environmentalists. Hitler was a vegetarian and a big believer in animal rights, like the Process Church.
Yeah, but a lot like the Process Church. The Process Church likes using tongue-in-cheek plays on their iconography.
Oh, yeah.
Which is wild. Every time I see it, I'm like, whoa. Oh, it's not that. You know what I mean? Like I have to go,
but it is that.
Exactly.
Like that's what it ends up being. Is there's such a strong affinity there on whatever level that they become that thing, even if they didn't intend that, which I don't believe.
Yeah, I think there must be. There's characters like Genesis Peorage who I would very much sit down and talk to who have things like the Process Church, the problematic Process Church logo.
Yeah.
Like tattooed on them.
Yeah.
Like on their forearm. Which was like, that's a bold move and statement.
Well, like we get into this, one of my favorite artists is David Lynch. But man, the more I study this sort of stuff, David Lynch is apparently, based on the things I've been able to pull out of how cryptic the guy is, he's a big follower of Alice Bailey. Let's see if we can get old Alice Bailey up here. Alice Bailey created a split in theosophy off of Madame Helena Blavatsky.
Oh.
And he's a big, big follower of Alice Bailey. If you watch Twin Peaks, which goes back to my John Huston thing.
Yeah.
The newest season of Twin Peaks has Candy Clark in it. Candy Clark was once married to Marjo Gortner, who we talked about earlier, right? And her first film that she started in was a John Huston film.
Wild. Weird connections. David Lynch showed up in a film about Shangri-La, the recording studio that Rick Rubin owns.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Shangri-La.
Yeah.
Let's find out what the Shangri-La connection is to Theosophy.
The band
But
recorded
he's
the Brown album there.
Lynch is a big fan of Alice and Bailey. Like, that's, as near as I could tell, that's the person whose teachings he follows. I'm not saying follows. I'm sure he would definitely take umbrage with that. But that's the person whose outlook is the basis of his ideology, regardless of how much he may have changed it since then.
Gotcha.
And yeah, you gotta watch out with Theosophy because it crypto supports racism.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, inherent in its philosophy is one of implied racism, if not what we associate with racism. No lynching involved,
Bigotry.
but one of just an assumed sense of people belong in their place.
This like eugenics kind of vibe.
Like a philosophical eugenics, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like certain. He very much gives that vibe sometimes. If you were to look at David Lynch's work from that filter, like sometimes he does give the impression there's people in the tower, people on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, like.
You know.
Oh, I think and he feels like he knows he's a genius, so you know where he feels he is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. He's talking from the tower.
The guy who did Disinformation, Metzger.
Oh, Metzger. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to do a radio show, and that's where initially the David Lynch Weather Report started.
Really?
And he was big friends with Genesis P-Orridge.
See, there's this strange occult connection between some pretty old big names, Rick Rubin, David Lynch, John Waters. There's this highbrow, what used to be lowbrow art scene that is just the what you want to get to if you're part of
And
that,
all
like,
of them
Cannes
went
Film
through the
Festival.
bizarre crucible of the 70s that seems boiled down at its basis to be represented by Rodney Bingenheimer's English Disco
Yeah. Yeah.
in some bizarre way.
Well, let's round this sucker down for the
Yeah.
evening. We'll bring this one in. Any closing statements?
On this one, man, yeah, I could, if we don't close it now, I'll just keep going on about this weird Hollywood back end.
Yeah.
That's tied to
Yeah.
the U.S. psychological study through John Huston at the same time that would be tied to this radar operator thing, if you think in crazy networks like I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to be getting to that. We'll see you guys around the corner. I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll probably see special guests in there. Everybody, be nice to each other. If you end up online and you see a strange network of criminal activity, turn it in.
Yeah, if it's the type of thing you're morally opposed to, take the time, turn it in. Like,
Yeah.
I hate to say it.
Yeah, turn it in. And thank you
Yeah,
guys for sticking
John Branch
around.
said Marjo was a child pastor. Like we said, true story. Absolutely. He was started at age 4.
Good Lord. Lord, that's young. All right, everybody have a